Hi, today we're looking at Telecasters and Les Pauls. Please take time to subscribe, it really helps the channel, and we'll get to it. There's an interesting history to these guitars. They both came out at roughly the same kind of era and roughly the same kind of year. There was a bit of history there with the Telecaster.
So Leo Fender was already well away with his company, Fender, making amplifiers. In 1951, Leo Fender brought out the Broadcaster, which would actually become the Telecaster later on. There was another piece of equipment available by a company called Gretsch, who do the drum kits and other guitars, and they had a drum kit called the Broadcaster. Leo had to change the name. There was a period between 1951 and 1952 where it just said Fender on the headstock, and they made something, and the guitars were called a no-caster for those times. In 1952, it was decided that it was going to be called the Telecaster, based off the excitement of the television. So it was kind of linked to a telly. Initially, for a guitar, it was quite rudimentary in terms of the way it was built, and it was designed so that it could be repaired very easily and rugged and affordable and easy to use. So some people were mocking it at the US trade show, calling it the paddle or the snow shovel. But that didn't last long, because obviously this guitar really took off. It was really important for guitar history and rock and roll. There wasn't much really fancy around the Telecaster with its simple kind of design. It had a ashtray bridge, knurled chrome knobs, Cluson tuners, and a combination of bridge and bridge pickup as one unit, which is quite a clever design really. If the neck would ever break, you could just bolt another one on. You wouldn't need to be a complex, you wouldn't need to be a luthier like you would if you say had owned a Gibson. And it had a simple black pick guard made of fibre or Bakelite at the time, which had like 5 screws.
And here's the history of the Les Paul.
Lester Pulsfuss, stage name Les Paul. He'd gone to Gibson way prior to making the Les Paul with his log idea for a solid body guitar. I think the log was a modular guitar in its construction. I think he worked with Epi on that. Anyway, Ted McCarthy, who was CEO at Gibson at the time, the first Les Paul was actually designed by Ted McCarthy and John Hyas, and it came out in 1952, around the same time that the Telecaster was named. It was it had a gold top on it. The gold top covered the maple so that people wouldn't notice the maple on it, and it had 2 P90 pickups, which I'll demo a guitar with P90s because I actually prefer those to any other kind of pickup. But they kind of, growing up, I didn't see a lot of guitars with P90s. The main sellability of it was its playability. It has a slightly different scale length, and the sustain is absolutely amazing on Les Pauls. So luxury carved top, set neck as well. It's properly carved as a guitar, and again, that's why it's an alternative intellectually to a Telecaster. However, it tends to still arrive to the same destination sonically, I think, sometimes. Initially, the sales were good, but they diminished off, and as the Les Paul was developed to its kind of best known guys, really, it kind of got taken out of production. So the main things that changed over the years were the bridges. So the first bridge on the Les Paul actually wouldn't work if you palm muted. It's kind of keep your hand off it, and it was like a trapeze tailpiece. Then they went over to a wrap over bridge, which I've got a couple of wraparound bridges, and I love them. The only problem with them is they're hard to intonate, and since that point, PRS has done a really cool intonatable wraparound bridge design, which they use on their current hollow body model and McCarthy model. And then in 1956, I'm going to say, the ABR1 came out, which allows you to adjust the individual pieces. Along with the Les Paul standard, they brought out some other models. So they had like a Les Paul custom, which was like double bound, had more blocky inlays. And they did a junior, which is really stripped down version, flat, not a carve on the top, one dog ear pickup. And then in 1957 the humbuckers came out. I think it was working with Seth Lover, designed the humbucker. Humbucker, also known as PAFs, patent applied for. You know, in comparison to a lot of standard humbuckers these days, they're a bit lower output, and they are kind of modelled to replicate a single coil, actually, like a P90. In 1958, you started to see the bursts. So the sunburst finish came out instead of the gold top or black, and then they started to put more figured tops from 1958, end of 1958, 1959, and 1960, and the neck started to get slimmer as well because they had quite thick necks. So from 1959, the 1959 and the 1960 just get slimmer and slimmer. 1960 being the slimmest, and then they stopped making them all together for a few years because they weren't selling enough. Basically, you needed people like Eric Clapton to pick one up, and they did in the end. And then Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and all of those guys sticking them into Marshalls and making them sound glorious. They were never sort of released again until 1968, so that's when they went back into production, and they were slightly different really to the ones that had came out before. Gibson was owned by a different company by that point, but the idea of the Les Paul is still the same. The tones are very similar. I have played an original Les Paul 59 Burst before, and I was totally unaware of the minutiae at the time. It was quite a privilege to play that guitar. I've also played a 52 Les Paul as well quite recently, and great guitars. Would I spend the money on one? I would if I could, would if I had it, but I don't. I'm quite happy with a Les Paul Standard or a Les Paul Tribute even, or a Les Paul Studio. They're all great. What's really cool about your Gibson stuff is they use nitrocellulose lacquer on them still. They stopped doing that with Fenders, so I think in the late 50s, in the late 60s, they stopped using nitro.
What's really interesting about these guitars is that quite a few artists had started out with them and had converted to the other one, and I think sonically they can be quite similar really, and quite versatile. The Les Paul is currently sort of my favourite guitar. The Les Paul is a really versatile guitar, and but both will sound quite similar. So I'm going to just demo these guitars. So this is going into a Woodrow clean. So that is just add a bit more room to that, just to give you. So here's just a nice big G on the neck pickup. So here's a big G on the neck pickup. And here's a nice big G in between. And here he's on the middle. And here it is on the treble with all the treble turned up. And on the bridge. What I'm going to do is just demo some single notes, so just so you can hear that sustain, that thing that Les Pauls are known for. And so that's just a clean demo of the Les Paul. And then if I try some single note sustain stuff, that's on the neck, both, and on the bridge. We'll try it with a little bit of gain. That's using an analog man king of tone. So by using that, it's quite transparent. And then most people will probably use like a tube screamer or a clon. And just with a gain on. So that's your gain Telecaster sound. The cool thing about Teles, they just feel lovely. So this is a Les Paul with a king of tone. And then in the middle pickup. And then on the bridge. Bear in mind I've wound the tone down just a little bit on the bridge. Fully up. Wound down a bit. High gain. So this handles gain really well. It's got quite a tight kind of sound with that beautiful sustain going on. What I'm going to do now is throw something else into the mix. So this is actually my favourite guitar. This is by no means the most expensive guitar that I own. It's my favourite for a reason. The reason why it's my favourite is because of the way it deals with everything. So if I just go on my neck pickups, just the difference is really these P90 pickups. This was designed at the same kind of time as the Telecaster. So these P90 pickups were the thing. So just with a big G. These are stock Gibson pickups, and none of the electronics have been changed on this guitar. Here's the in-between. And here's the bridge pickup. Maybe that's the sound I'm after, which is kind of between a Tele and a Les Paul. Let's have a listen to the Sustain again, lasts forever. On the middle, and on the bridge. I love this. Okay, so as I've tested with the others, I'm going to use just a king of tone just to give it some overdrive. And that's nice. On the middle. Just feels a lot more vocal to me than both the path and the single coil. Okay, and then we did a high gain thing. There's so much bottom end in this. And then on the bridge. Alright, cool. So that's just something to throw in the mix. So this is again a guitar from that kind of era. This was the P90 guitar that came out in '52 again. It had a different bridge. They had a bit different bridge at the time. So Telecasters, let's just do a little bit of a deep dive. Compared to the Gibson, these were designed, of course, to be made by people who aren't necessarily or weren't necessarily skilled luthiers at the time. It was almost like the Kalashnikov of guitars in that you could bolt it together. It was a reliable and utilitarian piece of equipment to use. You know, that was the initial intent, and he got it so right because it's such a great guitar, such a versatile sounding guitar. Now, my guitar journey is quite linked to this because when I was around 10 years old, I think I was 10 or 11, me and my dad went to Music Live, which was a music exhibition, a little bit like NAMM in the States, in the UK. It used to be in our second city, Birmingham, and they filled a few exhibition halls just full of guitars and keyboards at the time. And you could go and try them out, and they'd be selling stuff off. And if you went on the Sunday, they didn't really want to take a lot of stock back with them. And he managed to get himself a Squier Telecaster for, I think it was £50 at the time. And this was like in the 90s. This was like 1997 or something. So he got this Squier Telecaster, and my dad didn't play guitar. He sort of bought it as something to learn on. And my guitar was a Hohner Fender Strat copy, and it was very much like a sort of spec'd out like a 62, but it was like a junkyard sort of guitar. It was a guitar that you get from the pawn shop sort of thing. So anyway, my dad had this guitar, and it was just amazing out of the box. And I used to play it a lot because it was so versatile. So I would listen to records, and wherever somebody was using a Les Paul, I'd be able to get that tone, or at least approximate that tone, using my Telecaster. And I think the reason why was this pickup is just so obnoxious when you turn the gain up. So if I put some gain on now, that's great, isn't it? Give it a mid boost. So I used to do everything really with a Telecaster, purely because it was just so versatile. I used the tone knob a lot. I had an awful, well, at the time it was amazing, but really it was a Marshall Park 10 watt amp with a button that made it sound like a bumblebee in a jar, you know, which was supposed to be the overdrive. Solid state. But this guitar, these guitars do just they're very basic, but because they don't have a lot of complexity to them, they just work really well. The other cool thing is they're very easy to dial and set up. So even this one, this is a reissue. It's a '68 reissue. This has got like 3 bridge saddles that just move up and down. So you can only really approximate the intonation. I mean, it intonates great because of the design initially, but the one that I was using had individual saddles. It was a Squier Affinity series. It sounded fantastic, and it did a great job. So I think when we're looking at this, your Les Pauls and your Telecasters do have quite a lot of parallels. A lot of people go from using a Telecaster a lot to a Les Paul. So if we fast forward in my history to when I was about 19 years old, I was playing in a lot of in a band, and we were touring and playing internationally. Really, we were playing around quite a lot of fly gigs. I bought this guitar when I was 17, and it was a limited edition 68 reissue pink Paisley Telecaster made in Japan. I like the way this feels more than it sounds, and I think with a few little electronic tweaks it will sound better. But as a guitar, it rings beautifully. The neck just feels amazing, and the action has always been one of the best setup guitars I've ever been able to play. It's super low. Really effortless to play. It's taken a real beating. The knob selector, the selector knob had bashed off, and you can't put a proper one on it now, so I have to put like a Strat one on. But I do intend on upgrading these pickups and upgrading just the inside of this guitar, because a lot of the components aren't great, and I think that's the thing with the Japanese Fenders. The electronics always let them down somewhat. So I used this extensively, and then I bought myself a Les Paul Classic, and I replaced this really with the Les Paul Classic. And I think at the time I needed some money, so I'd actually sold this to my dad for obviously a low rate, but it meant that I could get the funds to sort my car out, I think, at the time. But this guitar has been in the family since, and like now I've got a hankering for a Tele again, so I've just bought it out. And it's after playing Les Pauls for the best part of a year, there's something really familiar about not the way it plays, but the way it sounds and the versatility that comes with it. But it's clean. These clean sounds are wonderful. So yeah, really cool. That's what I like about the Tele. If I had to start my collection again and something bad happened and I needed a guitar to start with, and I would probably go for a Tele, and I would probably go for one of the Squier Classic Vibe series, something like that, Vintage Vibe, Classic Vibe, or a Mexican Squier, or a Mexican Tele, a Mexican Tele as well, because they are just a brilliant workhorse guitar that you can just make work in any situation. You roll your volume, your tone back, You've got a jazz guitar. you can play guitar parts from a song. You've got a guitar that can do all the funk stuff. You want to do a solo, you know, just put that bridge one on. It's really cool. One of the songs, you know, so if I was to play like a track, I'm doing a gig in a couple of days, and there's a song we're doing where we'll probably want the guitar just to be a little bit driven for a section of it. So it's Do I Do, and I'll play something like this. Something like that. So it does have that kind of really punchy, clean kind of tone that just works great for everything. Les Pauls. This one isn't as heavy as a normal Les Paul. It's a 7-pounder. Which is a good thing if you get those like mid-2000s ones where they've been hollowed out. That's what this is. Path pickups. It's got Burstbucker Pro, and the Burstbucker Pro is a great pickup. And they were bought out. They brought them out sort of in the 2000s, and they are very, very puffy. You open it up and it says patent applied for. It's got an indicator of who made it. Very clear sounding. So I've got my tone. I normally use my volume down to like 8.5 to 9. That's a sweet spot for Les Pauls. Just ask Joe Bonamassa, you know. So the Burstbucker Pro is a great kind of pickup. They're very path soundy, if that's actually the way to explain that. They have that path sound. The path sound, you could go forever about what it is, but it's an early humbucker. Very woody sounding in my opinion. This is going clean. There's a little bit of a sparkle and a chime going on, but there's also a warmth in that tone as well. They're not a very hot sounding pickup really by any means. If I put it on both pickups, and normally I turn the tone down sort of in the middle. Just going to put it back on here. So yeah. And on the bridge, it sounds very single coily. I mean, this is with the tone all the way up. And turn the tone down a little bit. You put a little bit of gain on, so it's great, isn't it? If I turn the volume up and the tone down, It's really got that kind of thing. I really like that. You can also do the thing where it's quite a woolly woman tone. Add a little bit more gain. So paths are kind of the old school way of doing pickups. I think a lot of people actually, to be honest, try to make their humbuckers sound like paths anyway. Quite low output. Here's something I like to do. You know, I've got my Marshall kind of emulating. That's the other thing, there's quite a lot of clarity per string with that. I know it's distorting. But you can still hear that. So, obviously, a Les Paul sounds like that. Does it sound very Telecaster-y? I guess so. I guess so. If I had my full treble, turn my volume a little bit down. I guess the main difference is your low end frequencies and your mid range. I tend to use an EQ. But you hear down on the low end quite a lot. That's more of a Telecaster. So I use an EQ just to alter that sound. So there we have it. You have a Les Paul and you have a Telecaster. Two very different guitars, but actually do have similar tonalities to each other. People have tended to start on the Telecasters and opt to Les Pauls as time's gone on, and some people have gone the other way around. There's no better guitar here, they're just different. But I'll be interested to know in the comments what you think about Les Pauls and Telecasters, and do you just need to have one of each, or, you know, would you use one as a backup to the other if you can't quite afford to do that? And quite interestingly, what makes a Telecaster a Telecaster? I know that PRS have bought out the NF53. Sales on that guitar aren't what I expected. If you look at what the Silver Sky, what happened with that, which is essentially a Strat kind of guitar, it's outsold. Hasn't outsold the Fenders, but it is PRS's biggest selling guitar. But the Telecaster version, the NF53, it's not quite up there, is it, proportionally with sales? So I wonder if people just prefer their Telecasters to be a Fender, because I've noticed that, you know, Fender, people just tend to buy the Fender version of that and not really settle for any kind of copies. So I wonder if there's something there culturally. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Be excellent to each other.